Hello, everyone. We're here today for Fireside Chat with Max. Super excited about the content takeaways everyone's going to be getting out of this event. Today's event is brought to you by the team over here, Modern Sales Pros. For everyone who's not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners that they may not know about. We do that through live sessions like this, an online forum, and our quarterly summits. If you're not already a part of MSP, you'll be invited to join after this event. If you do like this event, you like our content, pretty sure you'll like or love our 3-day Redback Fest. We hosted it in October. Hold together 24 events, amazing content and speakers. You'll be hearing from the CEO of Gainsight, Outreach, HighSpot, and dozens of other speakers like them. Going to be dropping the link to those recordings in the chat. Give me 1 second, guys. Okay, should be seeing that link to those recordings in the chat now. Going to go over some quick housekeeping notes. First of all, this event is being recorded. You'll be able to access this recording and key takeaways on the previous events page of the MSP website. Second, if there's any questions for panelists, please do use the Q&A function, and they'll do their best to get to them during the event. Okay, going to pass things off over to you, Pete, and talk about Atrium, introduce yourself, and Max.
Max, how's it going? Thanks, Elliot. Really appreciate the introduction there. Max, lovely to see you as usual. Your living wall is beautiful.
Thank you.
Is that your handiwork?
No, I don't do anything. Wife and the interior designer pick it all out. Actually, so she did too in like the foyer area, and I was like, oh, I want one for my office. So
I know.
A little extra oxygen in here, you know?
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Excellent. Well, let me introduce Atrium really quickly because we're sponsoring this MSP event. So for folks who don't know, Atrium makes data-driven sales management software. It's software that helps sales organizations, so leaders, managers, and reps use metrics to improve the performance of their teams. One of the things that's super cool about Atrium is it takes 5 minutes to set up. It's super easy. You just log in with your Salesforce CRM credentials, read-only connection, and within 5 minutes, Atrium will show you how your reps are performing. You know, your AEs, SDRs, et cetera, are performing across hundreds of metrics. So that's a little bit about us over here at Atrium. I am pumped to talk with Mr. Max here, king of the sales hackers. We'll get into intros here. For folks that don't know me, my name is Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. And I am the CRO here, responsible for all go-to-market. Prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And subsequent to that, was responsible for new product sales at Monster Worldwide, and wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and started Modern Sales Pros, which y'all might be a little familiar with. But enough about me. You guys are here to hear from Mr. Max here. Max, I know that we're going to get a little bit more into detail in some of your background and what have you in our lovely fireside or living wall side chat here, but maybe you could give folks a little synopsis of what you're spending your time doing right now, what you did immediately prior to that, but don't, not too many spoilers because that's what we're going to talk about later, okay?
Yeah, I don't even know where to start with that, but started my career at Udemy, an education marketplace that IPO'd last year. Did some really hacky stuff there, parlayed that into starting a media company called Sales Hacker, which is where I wrote the book Hacking Sales. Sales Hacker was acquired by Outreach in 2018, became the VP of marketing, was at Outreach for 4 years. During my time there, started the GTMfund, which is what I'm working on full-time now as of August. And we've got a fund that is essentially 250 GTM leaders, VPC level sales, marketing, customer success leaders at some of the fastest growing SaaS companies. And we invest on behalf of that group of individuals. And then we're actually able to positively affect the outcome of those companies by supporting them on everything GTM, whether it's playbooks or candidates or help with customers, you name it. First 2 years we've been running the fund, we raised about 23 million, raised and deployed about 23 million. Now we're going out for a fund 2 right now. Yeah, all fun stuff. Wrote sales engagement while I was at Outreach when we were creating that category, and then also wrote a book called Career Hacking, just kind of as an aside, a passion project, based on, kind of doing it my way. A little
you and
unconventional.
you and Frank Sinatra doing it my
That's
my
song.
way.
That's my song. Yeah.
No way. I totally buy that. I buy that 100%. Oh man, we should have had that as your walk-up song.
We should have. No,
for this event.
I've done it all in a completely unconventional manner, and so I got to let my dog out. Yeah, it makes sense that would be the song that I've chosen.
I love it. Well, I'm really excited to talk a little bit more today. For folks who are joining us, if you'd like to get a copy of Max's book, Hacking Sales, and one of our Atrium Make It Rain Yeti water bottles, we're going to go ahead and drop a link to sign up for that here. All you have to do is sign up for that, and we'll get you dialed in. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen, so instead I can see you in live and direct. Yeah, maybe you could.
I have to know whose profile picture that you just showed was older. How long was the green sweatshirt picture taken?
Oh, here, let me share
my screen.
Monster? This was taken at my first round capital for some first round review articles that I wrote. So I think it's probably 2016. So I remember
yours is older then. Okay.
Yeah.
Mine was the first week at Outreach. So mine was like 4.5 years. I'm starting to think I need to take a new one, but then I saw I got less bad about it.
Are you why is that? I don't look like that anymore.
You actually do look pretty much. Your beard's a little longer, but you look exactly like that. Congratulations.
It's got gray in it. That's the problem. Yeah.
Ageless wonder over there.
Yeah. Awesome. So I want to talk about some of your experience before you started Sales Hacker, because I think that everyone is like super familiar with like Max from Sales Hacker, Max from Outreach, et cetera, et cetera. But you did some stuff before then, and like that's where you were actually selling. So maybe you could share a little bit about kind of what you did at Udemy, and kind of like and kind of what was involved with that.
Yeah, definitely. Back to the unconventional nature of my existence. I started a couple of businesses in college that failed. I wouldn't say epically failed, but definitely failed. And kind of found a way into startups through that. Realized that I probably needed to see how the sausage was made first and work with a couple of other entrepreneurs. And then ended up at Udemy because we were in one of my businesses that failed. We were using them to learn how to program and write code and things like that. Not very well, but we were getting there. And it was brand new. They had this business development role on the website. They just raised $1 million seed round, which, different times, but that was still like a, good size round. It was a little bit of a party round. And they needed somebody to come work on the instructor side of the platform to help grow, our instructor base. And
the supply side. Right.
Supply side, sales side, exactly. So like two-sided marketplace, instructors, students, growth marketing, growth hacking, that side was the student side, and then instructors teaching courses, that was the sales side. And I got that job, and I don't know how I got that job. I basically flew to San Francisco, did 7 hours of interviews, did a bunch of homework assignments, wouldn't take no for an answer, essentially, is probably the only reason why I got that job. I was certainly not qualified, and I found out about I met a couple of people we ended up hiring in different roles later on that were way more qualified than me. But I think they wanted someone who had an entrepreneurial background that could go think about how to grow that side of the marketplace from scratch in a way where they were taking over, like, it's two businesses inside of one marketplace. So, so I got to own that side of the business. And sales hacking came from the whole like mandate of you have to do more with less. We had no resources. We were an early stage company. It was, really hard for us to keep up with the Lindas and the other ones of the world who had all raised a ton of money or were really big companies. And yeah, so generating more with less, what'd that come down to? Well, we had to figure out how to hack it. And what we did was we scraped a lot of databases, public databases, using like
Really?
yes and things like that to go find all the best.
Because like because like it's not like a bunch of teachers or whatever were just like sitting there in like Zoom info or like Clearbit or like whatever, right?
The best way to do it is sit there and think about the problem, which was like, okay, we need to let's go niche by niche. We'll start with computer programming languages and computer programming courses. All right, where can we find people who already know how to teach courses on that? Well, what about best-selling authors? Then you go to Amazon and other sites and you scrape all the best-selling authors for all the different programming languages, and then put that into a list, and all of a sudden that's your lead list. So now you've got your ICP, you've got your list, fairly easy to pull messaging out of that, right? It's like, hey, congratulations on being a best-selling book. Do you know you can make more money off courses? Oh, by the way, it'd probably take you 2 seconds. And I think one of those really cool like tech inflection point type things are, Uber doesn't exist before you have this in your pocket, right? So like Udemy doesn't exist before you have a really high def webcam on your computer and in your pocket as well. And that made it easy, finally, for everyone to teach a course. You didn't need to, have a whole crazy setup in a studio anymore. And especially with programming languages, all you need is your computer, and you can go and pretty much teach anything. And then the other thing is like the messaging for the courses. Sorry, my dogs are coming in and out. The messaging for the courses is really fun.
For people who don't know, Max has the world's cutest King Charles Cavalier Terriers, if I recall correctly, right?
Yeah, they're amazing, but they're a pain in my ass right now.
Oh, come on. We love them. We love them. They're the cutest damn thing ever. Right. So you were saying about messaging? Yeah.
So if we had like an entire cohort of people who were doing programming language courses, for example, and we wanted to move into another niche that was like one chain link away from that, we could do that pretty easily. We can get in from teaching courses to developers to teaching courses to designers. Sure. But what we realized is like, if we want to do like yoga lessons or guitar or something like that, and we have developers on the platform, that's not so easy. So there might be a course where somebody can do like fixing your posture, for example. And if we call it just like yoga for your posture, it's not going to sell. But if we call it yoga for people who sit at desks all day and program, we'll get the crossover, right? That was like a funny.
It's essentially makes a lot of sense. Like you're laddering it up, right? Yeah. So like the supply side is these teachers who are teaching like Ruby on Rails or JavaScript or whatever, that then brings an audience. And then what we want to do is use the audience to then attract more supply, right? And but the audience has to like resonate with the supply and vice versa.
They've got to grok it. So
100%.
It's a funny balancing act. So like we always try to find ways to just generate more, revenue or whatever it was, courses using less resources. And one of the things we did was we had a team of virtual assistants in the Philippines that we turned into SDRs. And these were people who were, like admins that we just taught how to be sales development reps. And then we used early sales engagement technology before it was even called sales engagement or anything, called
I was just going to say.
Yeah, it was ToutApp back in the day, even before they did the round with Andreessen. I mean, this was 2011, 2012. It was just TK and maybe 3 other folks.
Did it have sequencing back then, or was it just like manual?
We drew up sequences basically.
Like whine at them, be like, please.
If then statements on a Google Doc that was like, if no reply, they get this. If no reply, they get this. If a reply and it's this, they get this. Like I was doing sentiment before, like way before any of this existed
using your right, exactly, like using the offshore the offshore assistants to be like the AI was not AI, it was real eye.
Yeah, exactly. And it was real life. It was somebody out in the Philippines that was doing it. And actually the virtual assistant who was with me from then, who started out there with me in back in 2011, in my acquisition agreement with Outreach, she was the only person, the only carve out I put in there was that the minute I leave, I can take her with me. And yeah, she's been with me for
Because
like
she's just nails. So okay, so you're doing lots of creative stuff. Sounds like you sales hacked together some sales engagement stuff. What other sort of like clever sales hackery things were you guys doing in order to like lever up the supply side?
Well, so all that laddered up to the point where like I can go out, build this list, say, okay, here's the group to contact and work today.
Mhm.
And then I had inboxes built out for them and everything. And so I would just walk into the office and I've got meetings on my calendar with people who've opted in to the emails that we sent. So it was like, I kind of hacked sequences and all that type of stuff to build out this program where like I didn't have to do any of the grunt work to get meetings on my calendar. I just had to get on phones. And that's really what it's all about. It's like automate out the things that you don't need a person to do. And
Low
then
leverage.
and then let the person do the person stuff, which is like getting on the phone and actually having a conversation with another human. And so that was pretty revolutionary. At least I thought at the time, and so did a lot of other people. And we started, we did this kind of invite only meetup that had about 8 of us every month. And every time somebody else would bring something to the table, and it was Ryan Buckley, who was the COO of Scripted, and TK from TowDep, Xander Ford from Blue Kai, and a couple other folks who were doing some really interesting things. And Justin Mayers was in there. He actually ended up writing like a growth hacking book called Traction. Matt Ellsworth, who was at Storefront at the time and ended up working at 500 Startups as kind of a growth marketer. So we would do meetups and we'd all learn from each other. And then I left Udemy, went to a company called Attorney Fee. We ended up getting acquired in 6 months by LegalZoom, and they wanted me to move to Austin and switch to marketing. And I said, there's not enough zeros on the acquisition check to make me do either of those two things. So here I am all of a sudden like, okay, well, what's next? And, it was kind of between like VP of sales at a super early stage SaaS company or running Sales Hacker. And I said, that was doing the meetups, who here would be interested if I started a conference around this? Seems to be a lot of people that are, have been coming inbound, hearing about the stuff we're doing. And it was funny, in that meetup, we had started to let like a couple people in. And so that was like 20 people. And in that meetup, it was Jason Lemkin, who had just sold EchoSign to Adobe. He was geeking out on the stuff we were doing. So he was there. Doug Landis, who was the VP of sales ops at Box at the time, Armando Mann, who just joined Relate IQ, and they shortly after that sold for like $500 million to Salesforce or something like that. And then Matt Cameron had just joined Scripted, but he was the head of global sales at Yammer before that. So like all of a sudden we got some heavy hitters in the room. And TK running TowDep at the time was like, hey, I'll sponsor this thing. And basically like foot the cost for the whole conference. So everything after that was just profit.
Where was the first conference at?
The Broadway Theater, which is like this hole in the wall in what is that, North Beach in San Francisco. And they use it for like little plays and stuff like that. But it was super cheap. They took care of everything. All I had to do was organize the content, sponsors, and sell tickets. All I had to do. There was a lot there, but at least it took the logistics off my back, and it kept the costs to do the show low, so that we can see what we really had there. And I thought we would have like 100 people. We ended up having 300 people at that one, and so that was pretty cool to see that there was actual demand here. And I think we were kind of a couple of years. This was late 2013. I think sales tech really had its like resurgence 2015, when you saw a lot of the funding rounds starting to get done.
I mean, the proliferation of the sales stack at the time. It was kind of like, you got your CRM, yep. You got your e-sign, yep. All right, have fun.
Like maybe you had LinkedIn Sales Nav. There wasn't much else. And then in 2015, TowDep did their Andreessen round, Outreach did their seed, SalesLoft did their A from Emergence. I think HighSpot, Seismic both raised money. Gainsight, Inside Sales raised a huge round. I mean, they were a huge player at that time.
Gong and Chorus started up around that time as well.
Gong and Chorus started up, like you didn't really hear about them until 2017. Like they were even a couple years later. And but I think like, sales tech was starting to get its name. And even back then, like from 2013 to 2015, 16, you had to steal budget from marketing to get anything for sales. Sales didn't even have it as its own budget. Like CRM was part of IT. So there was, you didn't even have a budget for sales, nonetheless, like sales tech. So now it's come a long way. And I think Sales Hacker was a big part of pushing that. Like, and even our evolution was like, at first we were kind of like sales for startups, like sales for people who don't have resources. And then it kind of morphed to like driving sales technology adoption for companies of all sizes. And then it morphed again to like all things modern sales, essentially. And then you guys came out with the whole modern sales thing and kind of put that all in a tailspin. I got to change it from modern to like next generation or something like that, because it couldn't steal your word. But yeah, no, it was a fun run.
Well, and you guys, I mean, I think one of the things that was really interesting with Sales Hacker is like you guys started out doing a lot of it was like a lot of physical stuff, right? Or conferences. I don't know.
Yeah, it was
is
mostly
the right word. Yeah, it's mostly. I remember the revenue summits were super fun. Like the revenue summits, that's what they were called, right? The revenue summit in New York, and then the revenue summit. Like, oh man, the one that you guys had at the that pier in San Francisco was like so beautiful. But I think ultimately you guys kind of were like, this isn't like as scalable as maybe we would prefer, and started doing kind of like more digital stuff, which is kind of like, if you think about Udemy, right? Like Udemy was a digital content marketplace. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that transition and kind of like what inspired that kind of transition, and how that set you guys up for the eventual acquisition.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say that I had like this whole grand plan, but we were kind of winging it the entire time. And I say we in like the royal sense. I mean, I didn't have a co-founder or anything like that. Hired people as I could. I think like one of the things we got, I don't know, maybe somewhat lucky around, was we ended up doing the SaaStr annual for 2 years with Jason Lemkin. And so there was like some revenue that came from that helped us hire and get on a path. And then also just being able to spend time with Jason and pick his brain on stuff. I mean, super brilliant guy who gets it. And, told us to double down on growth and like good things will happen essentially. So, that was one of the bigger inflection points for us is, we saw the writing on the wall for our industry in terms of doing sales events, that like our door was shrinking. We had no moat with what we did. And then all of a sudden the venture capital landscape got so crazy where companies were raising so much money so early that like in the past, like maybe to the 2016, 2017, if you were going to do a customer conference, you were like 1,000 employee company. You were a big company. Like you could have a loss leader like that. Now, all of a sudden, it's like 2016, 2017, companies are raising so much money that they're doing customer conferences really early on. And they're losing
so it makes it like noisy. Is that like
I mean, I remember
the audience's dance card is like, oh.
I remember getting to a point where it's like, oh, we got to find a time for our conference. And it's like, well, like Sales Loft's customer conferences this week, Outreaches is this week, this company's is this week, if we compete with those, like we lose a bunch of our audience. And oh, by the way, like I have to make money on my conferences. They could lose $500,000 on their conferences or more. So
and they're bidding up the cost of the venue and blah blah blah, right?
So everything's going up. It's a hard business to stay in, and like they could have Shaq do the keynote and Beyonce do the after party and serve sushi for lunch, and I have to do like box lunches and everything because I got to be cost conscious. And it just gets away from you. Like you don't see a lot of industry conferences that are trying to make money that are going to spend the type of money that most of these venture backed companies are doing. So the window's closing in there, and we saw the opportunity with growth in digital to be able to bring things online and start doing webinars and start doing more things around community and stuff like that. And we had some good luck and some bad luck around some of these types of things. Like we had a really good thriving Sales Hacker community that we hosted on LinkedIn, and in 2015, LinkedIn went through like a whole
they goofed with their groups. Product.
Well, they rebuilt the entire platform for scale, microservices or whatever, but they didn't do anything with groups for like 3 years, and they kept telling us that they were working on it, and they just weren't. And we waited too long. We should have moved it long before we did, and so we kind of lost that. So there were some good strokes of good fortune and bad.
I mean, that's like startups, right? Like it's the roller coaster ride of like, oh, the king of the world. Oh man, being ground under the boot. And it's in the same day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just one of those. And eventually the more you're in it, it starts to do this a little bit, but there's still the crazy highs and lows, and that never gets old when you're an operator. But yeah, and just being in the business as a solo founder, I think like also would have loved to have looking back on it, have a co-founder, because like there's at least you have somebody to commiserate with on some of those things.
Yeah, like a thought partner. I mean, this is something that I always talk about, like with sales teams in the office, and even like SDRs, right? Like somebody punches you in the nose in over the phone, and being able to turn to someone and be like, "Man, that sucked." It's like, yeah, that guy sounded like an ass. Like those are someone in the trenches with you is very helpful.
Yeah, it is, and even I'm a big fan of like doubling down on your strengths, and like you want to round out some weaknesses here and there, but for the most part, like you could just forget about them if you just hire the right people around you or have the right people around you. Like I don't need to get really good at stuff that a COO is going to do if I could just hire a really good COO. So yeah, I mean, that was one of those things I had more foresight into, but also I was a kid, and I learned a lot doing that. But yeah, we figured out how to get the business mostly to digital and preserve a lot of our revenue while having much better margins at that point and a lot less headache with doing in-person events, and ended
it's
up
also really scalable too. I mean, this is something that we've learned at MSP is like our virtual summits on MSP is just like, I mean, getting a bunch of people to like schlep to like whatever is like, I mean, because essentially a conference is a two-sided marketplace. It just happens to be at a time and a place, right? And the fact that it has to be co-located at a time and a place is like kind of a lot for the content side, for the audience side, et cetera. It's like a whole thing. And if now like you can virtualize it, now it's not the same thing from a experience standpoint. Like conferences are like absolutely fantastic for meeting and greeting, having some drinks, breaking bread, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're in it for like the content, like, oh, I want to listen to what Max has to say, I want to listen to what Pete has to say, et cetera. Like if you can do that at distance, then you can and if you're in the business of growing like an audience and growing a list or what have you, that could be a very powerful thing. This is something that we've come to find with the Modern Sales Virtual Summits is like, we add like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people every time we do a virtual summit, and like the speakers just like they just roll out of bed and put on their makeup, and the same is true with the on the audience as well.
Yeah, and we're looking at that even for the GTM fund. Like we do our retreats now instead of conferences for our LP base.
Nice.
We're doing no content because you can come here over the last 3 years, all content has now been put online. There's been
it's like the unbundling of it's like content online, in person only networking.
Exactly. In person's for time for like deeper bonding. And so like I think it's the end of the days where you go to an event and you
sit in a chair
cards
like
and
this.
You're like, yeah, and then you like meet somebody, but it's a super surface level meet, and you're just like, okay, I met that person at a conference one time, and then we're gonna sit here and watch more content that could have just been a fucking webinar or an email, and like it could have been anything. Right. So
it's like it's the old joke, like this meeting could have been an email. It's like this conference could have been a webinar.
This conference could have been a webinar. And because our group is somewhat exclusive because they're all investors, it gets pre-vetted. And I'm just saying, hey, let's all go to this really sunny, awesome place, have fun together, build deeper connections than the surface level BS. And if you want GTM content, go to SaaStr or Modern Sales Pros or Sales Hacker or
do it online, listen to it in your AirPods while you're on the treadmill, or like out of one ear while you're processing email or whatever. I love it. So then Outreach bought the media company, right? Maybe you could talk a little bit about what precipitated that, and then what you spent your time on at Outreach subsequent to the acquisition.
Definitely. So I was an early investor in Outreach, and there was an opportunity to get into Outreach and SalesLoft at the same time. SalesLoft was like a round ahead. This was like February of 2015. And met Manny, really believed in the way he was approaching the problem, really liked Kinzer, and knew the SalesLoft team very well because they were already sponsors of our events and they had the Prospector product before that.
Right.
it would have been a harder decision, but SalesLoft had some stipulations about being, more bias in, what we need to do with Sales Hacker at that time. And so obviously ended up making the outreach investment. And then it had nothing to do with the acquisition later on. Just we still worked with SalesLoft. We still worked with outreach. I was an advisor for Gong, which like now all of that stuff is competitive. I was an advisor for Drift also, a couple other companies in that space. But when it came to like 2018 and we were thinking about selling or what was next for us, I had this moment where I was like, how do I get to my number? Like whatever that number is that I want to be worth, or I want the company to be worth, how do I get to that number right now? And if I look at Sales Hacker, can I do that with our current business? And the answer was like emphatically no. But can I do that with like new business lines? And the answer was yes. But you weigh that out. How hard can that be? What are the risks involved? All that type of stuff. And then you say, okay, can I get to my number if we get acquired? And if so, how? And then you weigh that out. It's like, well, I'd have to go to a company where I believed it had a lot of room to run, and I'd have to go in at a decent enough valuation and take mostly stock and that kind of stuff. So I had a spreadsheet. I'm sure I still have it somewhere in like my personal. That'd be fun to fish out. But all of our potential acquirers on it, broken out by like type of company that it was. So there were SaaS companies, and obviously in that category was like the outreaches of the world. Then there was trade show companies like UBM, was like Informa, those types of companies. And there was consultancies, and like a lot of those would have been more like mergers than acquisitions,
like Winning by Design or something like that.
Exactly.
Or like Force Management, or
exactly, something like that. Scale, whatever it was. Then there were like big training companies like Miller Hyman, stuff like that. Then there were research and advisories. At the time, we were probably closest with like Serious Decisions. Obviously, knew the typical folks well, and all those. What else was on that list? Yeah, I mean, you get the gist. So we had all the companies laid out, and then on top of that, I had like who I was connected with at those companies, relationship strength, like probability, and then upside. What are we looking at here? Like, is this going to be a cash deal, stock deal? If it's a stock deal, is there enough, room for it to run based on, where the valuation was at and how I was thinking at the time? And the funny thing is, like, I look back, I mean, we talked to HubSpot for a little bit there, and I actually helped them out with a recent acquisition they made in the media space. But I looked at the numbers, and they wanted to do cash. And we were talking about cash and stock, and I was like, oh, well, I don't know if this business can like 10x or 20x, because they were already a public company. But if I go and look back, like at one point last year, they had at least 10x from where they were at, in 2018. Because
that would have, I mean, in retrospect, that would have been a really strategic acquisition for them. And like the funny thing is, what did they buy? The Hustle. It's very like the Hustle's like very consumery. It's like B2B, but like B2B light. And if you think about like what HubSpot's future is, it really is like, biting at the ankles of Salesforce, right? Like we see it in Atrium's customer base all the time, where organizations that used to, they would transition off of HubSpot to Salesforce at like 10 reps are now hanging on to 20 or 50 or whatever.
And they wanted to get people over from Salesforce for CRM, but they were also rolling out their versions of like Tout App and Yesware, those types of companies back then. So we spoke to LinkedIn. We knew people there very well. That was like just a cash thing. So anyway, we had a lot of conversations. Ultimately, went to Outreach's conference in May of 2018. I had 15 minutes with Manny, because there's a lot of other more important people than me, especially customers at his, and just said, hey, congrats on the $65 million Series D. What keeps you up at night? And he said marketing. And I said, oh, I got, 170,000 subscriber B2B sales media company, and you got best in class sales software. What are we waiting for? Let's do this thing. And he ultimately, or in the beginning, he was just like, yeah, I can't afford you. You just want to ride off into the sunset and live in Miami and, whatever else. And I was like, I'll come back for the right number. And like, you could afford me now. You just raised at a crazy valuation, and I'll take stock. And so we made the deal happen, and met with Matt and Anna and the team, and Kinzer, and talked more about the vision and where the company was going. And materialized, moved out to Seattle for 2 years. That was a trip. And then
I forgot that
yeah.
forgot that you were up in Seattle. Yeah, I mean, you're down in SF a lot. What after you joined Outreach, I think that you know, I think one of the you were talking about like customer conferences earlier. I think you know, taking a customer conference and turning it into an industry conference is always kind of like the move that people try to do. Right? Like I worked at VMware, and you go from like VMworld, it's all about VMware, to like VMworld, it's all about like data center stuff, right? And like Oracle World's the same sort of thing. And I think that you worked a lot on Unleash, if I recall correctly. So maybe you can talk about some of the things that some of the stuff you worked on there, and then maybe some of the other initiatives that you did around really instantiating and kind of trying to and seeking to dominate the sales engagement like category.
Yeah, definitely. So in the somewhere in the middle of the negotiation, they were just like, okay, you're going to be VP of marketing. We're moving on from our current VP of marketing. You're going to be VP of marketing. So I was like, oh shit, I've never done that before. Got to figure that one out. And they did support me with some amazing advisors, one of which was Elisa Fink, who was a CMO Tableau from like 0 to 1.2 billion in ARR, and gave me a coach. And you know, there are a lot of people in the building that were also, you know, very seasoned and would spend time with me on certain things. So very grateful for that. So came in, moved out to Seattle, inherited a marketing team, had to build that out. And we had Dreamforce in like 6 weeks and Unleash in 6 months. And a lot of stuff was already like booked and paid for, but the actual bones of the event wasn't built out yet. And we had this agency that the company liked working with for events. So even before I started working for the company. It's actually, we had like an agreement in place like 2 months before the legal stuff went through. So I get on the phone with this agency, and there's the one point of contact who's like somewhat junior in the agency that ran the whole event for us the year before. And I'm sitting here and I'm doing the math. I'm like, what it's going to cost to have them do Dreamforce for us and Unleash. And I'm like, I should just hire this person. And then she can use the agency and we'll come out ahead on money, but also like I'll have somebody who manages for me and I won't have to do it myself. And so her phone number was in her signature. And so after I hung up with the agency, I just called her direct, like right after. Just like, hey, I can get you in the door, in the building, rocket ship company, you get stock, and you probably make more than you're making right now. You what do you think? Here with a bunch of people you already like. And she was like, okay, deal. So our start dates were the same day. That's how early I got her before I even started working at the company. So yeah, we were hustling from like the minute that it was like, okay, this is going to happen. And so we ended up doing Dreamforce. And then like one of the cool things we did at Dreamforce was I did like a barter deal through Sales Hacker with the person who owned salesengagement.com. We ended up buying Sales Engagement for like pennies, basically, because he was a sales consultant who was relatively unknown, and I gave him 2 free webinars, which was like a $20K value, instead of paying him cash, you know, from Outreach's bank account.
How did he have the domain Sales Engagement? Like that wasn't even like a phrase.
It wasn't a category or anything. He just bought up a bunch of sales domains because he was going to do some courses he never got around to. And then like 2 or 3 years later, it became a category. So we bought that domain, and at Dreamforce, we launched the podcast and announced that the book would be out the same day as Unleash. And then we wrote the book, and then we had a copy of the book on everybody's chair at Unleash. The other thing that we did,
the sales hacker podcast or the sales engagement podcast?
Sales engagement podcast. So once I got to Outreach, everything was about category creation. So sales engagement book, sales engagement podcast, all hosted at salesengagement.com. That was all, you know, a part of Outreach's marketing program. And we wanted to drive that. And, you know, it's always like a race to being like the champion or the king of a category, but ultimately like everybody spends a bunch of money to go build a category together. So
I think that's the thing that people don't realize is like it kind of like it takes a village of people who are competing with each other to like break through the noise. We're just like, yeah, you should care about like, you know, marketing automation light. We call it sales engagement. Or like, hey, you should care about like call recording. We're going to call it conversation intelligence.
To me, right? It's all very like WWE wrestling type stuff. Like you need a little bit of a villain.
Right. They're like yeah, like the heel and the
here I am at Outreach, sales like our enemy or whatever. Sean Kester's like a good friend of mine. We're
I know.
going on vacations to Montauk and stuff like that. It's all good. It's all fun and games. We're all trying to win here, but like, I don't have any personal against anybody. And then like, then there was the Fire Festival thing that like Derek Grant did, and that became like a blow up on LinkedIn. And
but it's I think that's actually hilarious that when you bring it that way. It's like WWE / like hip hop beefs, where like the purpose of the beef is to like drive free eyeballs for everyone.
We all win. It's all good. Like it's gravy. I'm like, I could never. Not at one point was I ever like mad at an actual individual for it. It was just like whatever, man. Like, yeah, you missed.
Just gonna we're gonna stir the pot, and we're just make sure that we're at the top of everybody's LinkedIn feed constantly.
Exactly. We're all gonna be in the news cycle at the same time, and like you win some, we lose some. We whatever. Like I don't know. It was really fun. I think when you can get into a space where it's heated like that, it's really fun to be a part of it from the inside. And then like the second you get out of it, you realize how few people actually care on the outside too. It's just like,
I think that's the most important thing that you can tell. Yeah, it's just like it does to animate folks. And I think, startups are such a grind that you have to be animated by, by something that could potentially be like competitive fire. The other thing that you would do as well, but ultimately, like the thing that you need to be focused on is like customer utility and focus on the customer. So it's kind of like a yin and the yang sort of thing.
Oh, like the when people do like press releases, those are so stupid. The only person who reads a press release is like the product marketer in charge of competitors at your like main competitor. Yeah. The only person who reads it. Like
it's like an audience of one.
There were certain things we would do where like you would just be like, okay, nobody's gonna care about this except for like 3 people in the other company's boardroom that are like goddamn, we gotta do this thing now. Like you knew you were doing things just to stir them up when it was completely gonna go under the radar for anyone else. And it's like, all right, whatever.
I know.
This is funny. It's honestly that was
nice.
A fun part of the whole thing.
I love it. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the angel investing that you started doing, because that then folded with GTMfund. So I think that you started doing a little bit of angel investing while you were at Outreach, maybe a little bit beforehand. Maybe you can share a little bit about that, and then how that kind of transitioned into GTMfund, and then we can kind of round out things by like talking about what you guys are doing with GTMfund.
Definitely. So when I was at Sales Hacker, I had a good cash flowing business, but not a high upside business. Meaning, SaaS companies are getting 10, 20x multiples when they get acquired, maybe a lot more these days, at least. At that time, I have a cash flowing media company. I'd be lucky to get like 3x EBITDA or something like that. Like they just don't have good multiples. So I wanted to diversify out of my cash flow. And my way of doing that was leveraging the fact that like, all right, I'm somebody in the sales tech space that, one, if you're a sales tech vendor, I can come in early and help out in a massive way. But 2, even if you're anything else in B2B, I could support the business from a lot of my learnings to date and my network and stuff like that. So I was able to get good deal flow and good access because of those value props. And then it was just up to me to be a good picker of companies. And so that was my whole reason for angel investing at that point. And Outreach was my first check pre-seed, like $3 million valuation. So I had a pretty big winner right off the bat, but I think made some pretty good other bets. I have a couple, pre-2020 unicorns, so like real unicorns in there out of those investments, and learned a lot of valuable lessons I'm using now for the fund. And the fund came out of the same kind of hypothesis that I had, or the same need that I had, where I wanted to diversify. Well, sales leaders want to diversify. If you're a VP of sales at Salesforce in 2012, and you've got a friend who's another VP of sales at the same company, different unit, one of you goes to be the VP of sales at Zoom, and the other one goes to be the VP of sales at Achievers. 4 years later, one of you makes 25 million in IPO, the other one makes 0. And the person at Achievers could have been better. It just, the market didn't materialize, or you made the wrong pick on the company that you went with. And it has nothing to do with the skill set or how hard the person worked, but all of your eggs are in one basket. as a VP of sales. You're not able to diversify. And so when I was doing the angel investing and advising during my sales hacker days, these sales leaders would come to me and say, hey, like, can I give you money to put into these companies? Like, I don't have time to go and do this because it's work to go find companies to invest in or advise. Like, it's not only is it hard work, but there's a certain skill set to being able to get access and pick winners. And so, we came to 2020, AngelList came out with rolling funds and allowed anybody to raise and deploy capital as long as you could. They took care of the entire back office for you. And so that's when we had this kind of, hypothesis around, well, what if we got 50 of our GTM leader friends together, raised $1 million, put it into 10 companies, could positively affect the outcome of those companies by supporting them with GTM. And it was proven right. We ended up raising $6 million in our first year, about $15 million in our second year, another $3 million through SPVs from about 250 GTM leaders. We've got some institutions that are coming in and backing us, or that have backed us as well, that we let in. And we work with probably, I think, like 80 different VC firms now that are friendlies. And because our fund size is relatively small, we're complementary to other funds instead of competitive. So we have this really awesome value prop, and these funds want us in the rounds, and we're not taking a slice of their pie. We're taking a complimentary slice. So we've been able to get into some really awesome deals, and it's been a lot of fun. I'll tell you what, like, being a VC is very different than being an operator. It's like being a grandparent instead of a parent. Like, I get to come and give the kids ice cream, and then you got to put them to bed. So I'm not, I don't have to worry about a lot of the stress and headaches that each of the individual companies have to worry about. But it's still, we hustle, and we've got the community and the media side. So instead of just doing a fund, we built like a real platform around it. And so fund, community, media. And so the podcast, the GTM podcast is out, the GTM newsletter. And then we've got a community of our GTM leader LPs, about 250 of them in our Slack channel. And we just had 90 of them we hosted in Scottsdale at the Biltmore for our GTM fund retreat. So we'll do 2 of those a year. So it's built a cool little community, and it's been fun to do.
It's kind of funny because earlier on you were talking about, like, how do I get to my number, et cetera, and you're like, well, I guess I could do like ancillary lines of business on the Sales Hacker platform, right?
Yeah.
So it was a media business. You're like, well, the media is like, I monetize the media. It's like kind of fun or whatever. But now essentially what you have is a this fund that has like a media kicker to it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So, the funny thing about the number also is, like, the number helps you sleep at night, and it's like peace of mind, and it helps you do fun things. But like, ultimately, I always thought I wanted to get to my number and like retire. And then you get to the number, and then you're like,
okay, not you, man. Not you. No way.
I tried to retire. I tried to try. I had like 3 months of paternity leave twice at Outreach. And and I always spaced them out, like took a month right after the kid was born, and then the other 2 in the summer. And the first month of my the second month of my first paternity leave, I ended up starting Cold Email Grader as a side project because I was bored. I mean, like, I can't sit still. I love this stuff too much. So there's no such, I think retirement's a silly thing. You're always going to have like hobbies or passions that you pursue. Mine just happened to be this. So
anyway. I love it. Any companies in GTM fund that kind of like notable investments that you might be able to share with folks who might be listening?
I was gonna say, should I share ours? The ones we're in together. Census. What else? We probably have a couple.
I love Census. It's like my favorite product to like hack around with in Salesforce. It's absolutely fantastic.
Writer's a good one. Mutiny's great.
I worked with I was a baby PMM at VMware with Jale over at Mutiny.
That must have been a little up and coming dream team over there. She's great.
It was pretty solid. It was Bogomol Volkansky's product marketing team over there.
He ended up doing the A at Sequoia.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. Yeah. Ryder is an Atrium customer. James Lee runs sales operations over there. He's absolutely fantastic. Excellent. Well, I think the important thing is that if folks work for a GTM centric, GTM tech, company they should keep an eye on, and they're thinking about capital partners, they should definitely keep it GTMfund in mind. Is it just GTMfund.com?
Yep.
Well, that's easy.
Yeah.
Nice, easy peasy. Well, I think we have to wrap up here, so I'm going to go ahead and pass things back to Elliot to wrap things up. But Max is super awesome. I appreciate you taking the time, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yep. Thanks, Pete. Going to start to wrap things up now. First, do want to thank everyone for attending. Always love having you guys here. Do want to say thank you to our sponsor, Atrium. Make sure to check them out. Link to the website will be in the chat. Big thank you to Pete and Max for providing the content. Recordings and key takeaways will be available on our page shortly. Also, don't forget to check out our upcoming events. We'll see you guys next time. Take care.